Where do you find your inspiration?
In the bathtub. It's always there. I don't know why.
It's tranquil, it's peaceful.
I just get in the tub and there it is. No, you know.
We brought your tub here. Okay, I'll take your word for it this time.
Honestly, you know, inspiration is one of those things that you kind of have to sit and wait for, and you know, some days you're lucky and some days you're not.
Right.
I mean, you know, emotion and anger and passion and all of those things, the human emotion is what inspires and drives you to.
That elderly man driving by with the vile insult was a huge inspiration.
If it hadn't happened, who knows where my life would be.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because we have inspiration for you. We have tailor-made inspiration for you today.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a little screenwriting exercise we call the object. Frederick, we have an elderly man, but he's not in a car or hurling vile insults. Instead, he's got a tray with an object on it. So here's the deal. The object is unknown to you, obviously. We chose it very carefully. When you see it, you make up a story about it, whatever comes to mind, and then I ask you, after I hear it, why you came up with that particular story.
All right.
Okay, excited?
Thrilled beyond words.
Show the woman her object.
Your object, my lady.
Ah, fantastic. This to me would be the story of a mother, and this is her only remnant. And this is the thing that drives her every day. You know, obviously, looking at this, the first person that you think of is Cindy Sheehan, or that I think of as Cindy Sheehan, because she's someone that I happen to know. And someone who's been driven to action from a place of such great pain and tragedy. I mean, just looking at this makes me think of...
That entire story kind of can pop into...
Yeah, and just that this is what it boils down to for some people, that this will be their whole life. This is what's left, you know, and the duplicity that left them with this. And, you know, all the good intentions of all the people in the world who believe in freedom, and yet there are some people who just have a piece of metal with a name on it left to carry around with them and try to save other people from the same fate.
That's incredibly moving, and I guess, you know, that particular object's so evocative because it stands for exclusively that, and I guess, you knowing Miss Sheehan's story, I could see how you could get there. Well,
Right now, especially, you know, as we look at a war that's, you know, going to run on for we have no idea how long, and how many of these are going to be just this. I think it's this object by itself, you know.
Right.
It's not a picture of a person wearing it.
Right.
It's not, you know, nobody showed up with it on.
Right.
No, you know, I mean, you could tell the story of there's a million trillion stories that a dog tag can evoke. You know,
and the fact that it's not attached to anyone is meant something to you in terms of what you were thinking of.
Exactly. That there it is, and that's it by itself.
Right. Do you want to tell stories that reflect the world we live in terms of current events, or you know, would you call yourself a political writer?
I don't call myself a political writer, but I think if you're aware at all of what's going on in the world, you're probably going to brush up against it, you know?
Do you think some of that will be seeping into your work in the near future?
I hope
more
so.
than it has in the past?
I think so, because, you know, it seems like things are spiraling more out of control. You know, when you really look at what's happening in the world, it's really difficult to turn away and go, you know, I just want to write comedy.
Right.
You know, even though I think making people laugh is maybe one of the worthiest endeavors that a human can undertake. It's also a very trying time for anybody who cares about this country and cares about people around the world, and you know.
Do you feel an extra responsibility as an artist because of the times we're living in?
I think I don't know if I feel an extra responsibility, but I constantly feel a tug
Right.
that I should be doing something, that I should be saying something, you know, that's going to in some way illuminate or motivate or otherwise, you know, cause someone to act that might not have before. And you know, unfortunately, events on their own don't often seem to be enough.
Yeah.
Until the artists kind of throw in and start talking about it, that often is the thing that will be a catalyst for people to start taking action. I mean, I think documentary filmmakers right now are probably saving the world as much as any dramatist ever could. And I say saving the world,
Sure.
of course, you know, not...
Just putting a little light on some issues
Right.
that need light.
Yes, definitely. I mean, when you look at what's happening in Darfur or, you know, Iraq, or what's happening in our own country, you know, with the economy and the shape that it's in, and the lack of health care, and the schools closing, and the, you know, it's just, things have gotten so sadly out of balance
Right.
from a humanistic standpoint that I feel a lot of shame, you know.
How do you think that will manifest in your creative process?
I'm looking forward to finding out.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's funny because it's the thing I've been grappling with lately. You know, I hear the word freedom and I feel shame, and I've just become aware of that
Because
lately.
you feel like the word's been hijacked, or the meaning's been hijacked.
and I feel like it's used as a weapon. You know, and that we're having to, in some ways, agree to tell a lie for the sake of some people who are actually making real sacrifices, you know, that have to do exactly with this, you know. I mean, I really respect people that will fight for our freedom. I really want them to be fighting for our freedom,
Right.
you know, and I'm not sure that that's anything close to what's happening here.
Do you feel like there's a theme of characters getting pushed to the point of outrage in your work? You know, even talking about this object, going from, you know, what inspired you with Thelma and Louise, you know,
Right.
the Sandra Bullock character in Divine Secrets. Even there's this wonderful theme in these things, and even in your story here about, you know, what is your threshold for outrage, and when do you say something is not just, and when is it's a wonderful tradition, you know, going back to Capra, of like one person standing up and going, this will not be the way it's going to stay.
Well, Capra movies are you know, probably the single most inspiring group of films besides Billy Wilder and you know,
Yes.
then there's George Cukor,
Right.
and then, you know,
There's so
I mean,
many,
I could go
but-
on and
yeah.
on and on, but
For you, Capra and Billy Wilder were kind of at the top of the pyramid.
yes, and even though they didn't necessarily deal with it, I mean, you know, Capra certainly did. I mean,
Right.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is
Yeah.
you know, a high water mark.
Right.
For,
Great Gene Arthur performance.
fantastic. And, you know, the kind of outrage that you should feel, you know, we've been kind of numbed out of. And I think, you know, or if you look at a movie like Network, you know, I mean, it's
So ahead of its time.
it's
Predicted
right,
everything,
Yeah,
yeah.
It really did. And I think that, you know, outrage, I mean, I've heard people say in the past, you know, anger is such a useless emotion. And I'm like,
No, it's not.
it's the path to justice. You know, until there's outrage, there's no movement, you know? And I think that it is absolutely the most necessary thing to cause change and to
Right.
you know, drive us to our better nature.
Do you think, you know, your credits are admirably brief, because it seems like you really work on the things, at least the originals or the adaptations, but you work on things that you really care about. Does it take a while for you in between projects to kind of boil up with, not outrage, but like an impetus to say something, and does that contribute to the fact that you haven't done so many movies, but that there's been a lot of time between movies?
You know, it's difficult for me to find things that I really want to commit to, because it is such a huge investment of time, you know, for me.
Right.
I'm not fast. Although, you know, it turns out I can be.
Right.
But
What are you doing with your time when you're not writing?
living,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And and I'm really looking, I'm searching. I feel like, you know, I'm kind of fly fishing or something, you know, I'm casting. And
are you looking for things that you can rewrite as a vehicle to direct as opposed to writing your own spec screenplay?
I do both.
Okay.
You know, and I'm praying, you know, I'm praying for inspiration and you know, and I'm trying to experience life and people and all those things, you know, and yes, I'm reading scripts and I'm reading books and, you know, hoping to find that thing that I just must make. You know, and I find them, and that doesn't mean they, you know, a lot of the reason these long things go is I'll pursue something for, you know as well as anybody how many years you can spend on something that by all accounts should be a big movie and that ends up never getting made.
Right.
So,
sometimes you encounter studio resistance to things that you can be compelled to make something, but you can't get the powers that be to agree.
Exactly. And that's been a very common experience for me over the years.
Has it gotten worse?
I don't know. You know, it's like it's not a long enough period of time. I mean, I've only been doing this since 1990, so it's not a long enough period of time for me to say, you know, it's a trend. That's something, you know, I'll be able to tell more about later, I guess.
Tell us about your involvement with the WGA. You know, what positions did you take or do you hold, or why did you get involved with that whole thing?
Well, I've served 2 terms on the board of the Writers Guild, and I did it because, you know, I think it's important to serve your guild. I mean, I did it out of a sense of, you know, hopefully being able to contribute something. You know, I was so very, very fortunate getting into this business the way that I did, and to kind of have, you know, a fairly golden entree, you know, that I felt like I better put back. I better put some time in, you know.
So you felt you owed service.
Yeah. And I think it's really important because, you know, the lot of screenwriters in this town is you know, famously poverty-stricken.
It's
you
a little
know,
lamentable sometimes.
Not in terms of financial remuneration, but in terms of, you know, the creative experience, or, you know, the amount of time that you're allowed to be a part of the whole process. You know, it's extremely frustrating, and I think trying to change that was important to me as it is to a lot of screenwriters.
Can you have an effect on changing that, and what has been done while you've been serving this way that's improved things for writers?
Well, you know, there have been ongoing negotiations with all the studio heads for years of trying to get more rights for writers to be allowed to be at the first read-through of a script. I
remember the last time I was at DreamWorks and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who had negotiated for the studio side, came in and said, here are the new rules about you know, bringing writers to the first test. All the writers come to the test screening now.
Right. You know, and I think it's important. I mean, first of all, if you want writers to write good films, they have to be familiar with the process. You know, oftentimes, I've been doing a rewrite on a film. They'll read through it, and then I'll hear later, well, this didn't work, that didn't work, and I'm like, well, you know, why? And then you have, you know, either an articulate person or an inarticulate person trying to explain to you what didn't work, where you could have been there and heard it with your own ears and you know, possibly done some good. But now you're just kind of, it's as if you have to hear everything through a concrete wall. You know, the work is all meant to be performed. It's all meant to be up on its feet. You can't imagine a circumstance where a playwright would be asked to stand outside the theater while the play is being read and then told later how it went. But that is the typical experience for a screenwriter, you know, and it's ridiculous. It doesn't serve the process in any way.
And I find it is the least offensive job in the pecking order. I mean, the writer is not... It's a pretty benign, you know, job in terms of how much aggravation it could actually cause. They're there to help most of the time.
You know, I don't know a screenwriter that doesn't know that they're there to help the director make the best film
possible. They're not wrecking the
possible.
hotel room the night before. They're not like stomping around the set.
Exactly. And if the person is doing that, then like anybody else that's doing that, that's destructive to the process, they should be replaced. But that's, you know, almost never the case. The fact that that's been the rationale over the years for excluding the screenwriter is just
ludicrous,
ridiculous, and, you know, defies explanation. And certainly, you know, no good screenwriter is ever going to be able to accept that that is their position. You know, to not even be allowed to hear the words spoken out loud is, you know, until it's already filmed is, you know, it's insane.
And even without the changing of the rules, or when it's a grown-up director and grown-up executives and good people all the way around, the writer's there.
Right.
It's organic. It's in the ideal world, the writer is there.
Well, a strong director isn't threatened by having, you know, competent people around them, and they surround themselves with competent people, and so, you know, I think that it speaks a lot to, you know, the caliber of directors that are hired as well, because, you know, if somebody is worried that somebody's going to know more than them, you know, they might not
be the right person.
Right.
Now that you're a director, how do you come out on the film by credit issue?
I don't take it.
Okay. Do you disagree with it on principle?
I do. I disagree with it just because I know as a director how many people are giving 100% of their abilities to make that a film.
Even if you're the writer-director, you don't feel like a film by does justice to the other technicians?
I don't need it. I've written and directed it.
Right. Scorsese has famously said, directed by is my credit.
Yeah. The DP is making an incredible contribution. Every department is contributing. The production designer is making an incredible contribution. You know, if you're doing it right, there's a lot of people who are telling this story along with you. It's not a film by one person.
Right.
You know, it's not a true credit.
Right. It also got, I mean, that credit got kind of demeaned. I mean, studios give it out like it's Pez. I mean, you know, you could end up directing, you know, part 3 of Caddyshack and get a film by credit.
Exactly. It doesn't mean anything. It's a vanity credit.
Business affairs department started using it as just a way to get people cheaper or to work cheaper.
Exactly. And I think it's cheapened the whole thing.
Right. Is the struggle for credit, or the way credits are arbitrated, is it weighted for the original writer? And how's that process? You know, I can't get a handle on how it works because it changes from...
I don't think anybody can get a handle on how it works. I mean, yes, it is weighted very strongly towards the first writer. And, you know, there were reasons for that, but the business has changed a lot and more. I mean, again,
do you think
it's
that
not a
needs
true representation of the work that's done.
Do you think that needs an overhaul, the credits?
I do.
Right.
It's just going to be one of those things that's going to be very, very difficult to work out how it's going to happen, because, you know, you don't have any control over whether or not you're replaced. So many people can come in and replace you. I mean, can decide to replace you. It's not the studio can decide to replace you. The director can decide to replace you. A movie star can have you replaced. You know.
Sure.
There's just so many people along the way who can just, you know, in an effort to make themselves feel more secure, decide this writer's written out. Let's bring in this person. And, you know, they may do work that ends up in the film, maybe not. But, you know, a lot of times people are contributing equally. And it's just...
What's the criteria for an incoming writer or a second or third writer to get on-screen credit or credit?
Right now, I'm not sure exactly what the percentages are, but I think if it's an original, I mean, if it's, you know, not an adaptation, it has to be, you know, 50% or more. And
that's determined by a review board?
Yes, 3 people that you don't meet, that you can't, you know.
Because you don't want to run into the person at a cocktail party and go like, hey.
The thing that's saddest about it is that the arbitration process, you know, the word arbitrary is more applicable than arbitration, unfortunately.
But at least it's writers judging other writers.
Yes, but, you know, it's not necessarily a jury of your peers. I mean, if it's 3 writers who haven't ever worked and had their work rewritten one time 20 years ago, I mean, you know, it's not a foolproof process. And, you know, I think a lot of people find it very unfair that they can be the writer who got the film greenlit and got all the actors attached and got a director attached and walk away. And the reason it's a problem is because, you know, you're left out of the financial equation. You're not getting a production bonus, and you're not getting residuals, and you're not. Those are the things, you know. And it pits one writer against another for money, and no other aspect. I mean, if an editor is replaced, you know, they don't not get a credit, or if you know what I mean.
Yeah. The editor thing is a good example, because even if the editor is replaced, the amount of work they did isn't arbitrated by an editorial board.
Right.
The Writers Guild really is the sole place for that kind of arbitration. It's not I guess it's not a perfect system, but it's the best system right now.
Right. Well, it's because bonuses are tied to production credit.
Right.
They should unlink those things so that
there's no financial motivation to skew an arbitration one way or the other.
exactly. You know, to make writers fight each other over money, I think is really.
It sounds like a blood sport.
Yes, it is. Well, it's
Right.
and it's, you know, it's debasing to everyone.
Is there any kind of camaraderie between or among female writers in town, because it is kind of like a small group, and you guys all kind of talk and
I
stuff?
think, you know, yes, but I find there's camaraderie among all screenwriters.
Right.
You know, when we do meet, we have a grand time.
And
you
what's the form of these meetings? Like what happens?
You know, for a while, we were really actively trying to get people together, you know, once a month, getting a group of screenwriters together. And now, you know, I just know so many through the Writers Guild and whatnot, and I find that they're just the funniest and most interesting people, you know. They're really great, wonderful, hilarious people, and so
it can get your morale up to hang out with other writers.
And you know, I mean, it's like only screenwriters know what screenwriters are going through.
Right.
So you know, it's
so it's therapeutic in a way.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by the business side of the business after Thelma and Louise? Obviously, you were thrust into the upper echelons of the business, but were you surprised by the way that side of things work?
I think so. You know, I'm more surprised the longer I'm in it at how far away from entertainment and movies the business has gone. It's so much about business.
Right.
There's so few filmmakers involved in the business side. There's so few people that love movies that are involved in the business side. And, you know, it's just seems like it's skewed very heavily towards marketing. And the people who are in charge of marketing are telling what the filmmakers what they can make, and you know, telling the studios what they should make, and it's a lot more about business and a lot less about movies.
What's been your most gratifying experience as a writer so far?
Well, I think Thelma and Louise was, you know, the high water mark, certainly the standard against which everything else will be compared for me personally.
Right.
Writing this pilot was extremely enjoyable.
Oh, excellent.
You know, getting to work with Stephen Bochco has been an absolutely amazing experience. He's so smart. He's such a great producer, and really surprising. I mean, I was just shocked at how much I enjoyed it. And I just decided to put my trust in him, you know, and kind of give over to the process.
Right.
And it's been incredibly rewarding to get to work with him and to work that way. And the writing came pretty easily, and the directing of the pilot went very, very well for me, you know, just in terms of being a really rewarding creative experience. And so, you know, but writing that pilot was a lot of fun.
Because that was your first TV experience, right?
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference between the sitting down to write a screenplay and sitting down to write a pilot TV series?
You're done in half the time. You only have to write half the amount of pages. That was part of what got me through it. I was like, God, it's going to be 60 pages top. I can do that standing on my head.
So that had a great appeal for you.
Yeah, it really seemed great because, you know, essentially every writer wants to just stop, you know.
The actual writing, the nuts and bolts writing is
I
very...
recently was fortunate enough to be one of the 101 best screenplays awarded by the Guild, and had to speak at the Writers Guild, and I did a thing about how I like to get up every day and write, and it's all I think about, and I love to write, and I'm one of those people who just thinks about it all the time and can't wait till I'm doing it. And then I, of course, told the truth and said those are the words that really want to cause me to give somebody a severe beating. Because you do hear people say that.
Did you do the fake out? Did you give it to
Yes, I did
them?
a big fake out. And you know, I don't know people that say that. I mean,
It's
the
work.
people that I know that say that are kidding themselves,
Right.
or they're not any good, or they're brand new, or whatever.
Right.
But the people who are really having to do it,
It is hard work.
it is hard work, and it is lonely work.
What's been the best piece of advice or insight you've picked up from a mentor or someone else, you know, over the years that you've remembered?
Show up for the muse.
Oh, can you explain or elaborate on that?
It's as simple as you must be present to win, I guess. You know, if you want to write, you really do have to, you can't put it off. You really do have to just show up.
Because you could miss your own good ideas. is
Yes,
what you're saying.
exactly. You know, I always joke, I never have a pen because what if I get an idea, you know? But it's kind of the truth. You do have to just, whether you write longhand or at a computer or whatever, you've got to just get yourself there. It's the hardest thing in the world to do.
Are you a reluctant attendant to your own muse?
Absolutely.
Right.
Have to be forced, you know, literally have to be grabbed by the nape of the neck and, you know, shoved down in front of the computer most days. It's just, I don't know why the resistance is so great, because once you're there, it'll happen.
Right.
You know, most days. I mean, believe me, you go for weeks where nothing happens. You know, I mean, you've been a studio executive, you know, you've heard all the stories. So, you know, and they're true.
Right. If you had to give one piece of advice or share your insight with us, what would you say in one sentence?
About screenwriting?
About beginning screenwriters or someone just getting into the business?
I guess the thing that I would hope that someone would be able to do, that if I could pass something along, you know, I don't think it's necessarily about writing what you know, but writing what you believe, you know? I think that that's the most important thing you can do. If you're the kind of person who just wants to be a screenwriter and get a movie made, I think you're going to have a really hard road.
Right.
You know, I think if you're a person who really wants to tell a story and really wants to bring something to the world, who really feels like you're going to do something that nobody else besides you can do, that's really worth doing.
Great. What's next for you? What's coming up?
Well, we'll see if this pilot gets picked up. If it does,
are you going to stay with it?
I will stay with it, and I imagine it'll be a fresh hell I can't even imagine. I was talking. Stephen Bochco was walking me through what our life would look like if we did get picked up, and I said, I agreed to this when? You know, I can't believe it. It's going to be writing. But if it doesn't get picked up, I'm not really sure what's next. You know, I kind of feel like I want to step back a little bit and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing, what I'm supposed to be talking about. You know, I feel like I've come to a point where I know I can make a living writing scripts, or I hope I can. I can make a living doing rewrites. I would like to do more than that.
So a little bit of a period of reflection.
Yeah, and just regeneration.
Well, given the way you feel about work, I'm going to say good luck with either not getting the pilot picked up or getting the pilot picked up. But
I'm screwed either way.
You're screwed either way. Well, we want to thank today's subject, Callie Khouri, for being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Very fun.
It was fun for me.
Thank you for watching as well. Please remember to check out the other great interviews in our series with industry pros. And remember, it all starts with you. The next written buy credit could be yours. I'm Mike DeLuca.